she thought Heidi might not have gotten the text right away. Because,
no, I don't think she did. Hello.
Greetings, Earthlings.
Good morning, Starshine.
Closer up on that thing right there.
The Earth says hello.
Now I have a creepy picture of Johnny Depp in
That
my.
is probably one of his worst roles.
I have never actually seen it.
It is quite
He
creepy.
does creepy really well.
It's creepy. It's
Edward
not,
Scissorhands. Just creepy. So
I would say that Edward Scissorhands was not as creepy as his Willy Wonka.
yeah, well, that's
just throwing that.
Jack Sparrow, kind of creepy, charming, creepy, but creepy.
Kind of attractive. I don't know what that says about me, but
says you don't like dental hygiene. Apparently,
I feel like you need to scoot in a little more, or don't do this.
Yeah.
Sup.
Anyway,
All right.
So we're on the
this?
thing.
Where's the thing?
Hit the start button. Is there a start button?
There usually is. Oh, the cookies thing was blocking it. Allow cookies. I always allow cookies. If you want to give me cookies,
I'm a big fan.
I will allow it.
I'm a huge fan of oatmeal raisin cookies. Big fan. Oh. Really? Gabe doesn't like raisins, so he doesn't mind oatmeal cookies. He just doesn't like raisin in there. My brother likes oatmeal scotchies.
I like oatmeal
Shelly doesn't
scotchies.
care for those because she doesn't like
butterscotch.
Fake butterscotch. She likes real butterscotch.
Yeah, butterscotch chips are kind of.
She doesn't like.
Oatmeal raisin cookies.
I love them. I love all things that make me unhealthy. it's kind of how it goes.
Including oatmeal raisin cookies. Hello, everyone.
Including oatmeal scotchies and oatmeal raisin cookies.
Oatmeal raisin cookies are like the chocolate chip fake outs.
That's what Kayla doesn't like.
You reach for it and you're like, oh, a chocolate chip.
So to me, that's just, why would you expect anything else?
Because I always expect chocolate.
But if you have, this is why you get disappointed in life.
That's my problem.
If you expect raisins and you get chocolate, you're not going to be disappointed.
Lower your expectations to raisins, everyone.
But
my movie candy used to be when I was a kid, Raisinets.
How could it not be? I love Raisinets.
Well, because they're terrible now.
They're awesome.
Now I'm a Junior Mints girl.
I also love
I've convinced my child to be a Junior Mints
like
boy.
Goobers or
Are
any
Goobers
other
peanuts?
Yes, chocolate covered peanuts I can dig. A mix of Raisinets and chocolate covered peanuts.
No, because then I'd feel like, oh, I'm going to get a goober and it's a Raisinette.
Let's see if you eat them by the handful.
Oh no, I don't want that combo.
Do that.
And you're in the dark in a movie theater
just
and you don't
with
know what's happening.
Candy corn with peanuts in it, which tastes a lot like Payday. Actually,
I don't like Payday.
I'll pray for
There's
your soul.
There's no chocolate.
Chocolatey Payday.
Is there a chocolatey Payday?
Yes, there is.
Oh, I might like
it's a lot like a Baby Ruth, actually. But,
I do like a Baby Ruth. My qualm with Baby Ruth is that's too dry. It's too dry and crumbly.
The chocolatey Payday is a little less so.
I would like that.
A little less. They're both going to do that.
You know what I think my favorite candy bar has become is a Snickers.
It's hard to go wrong.
I mean it's like the perfect ratio of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Snickers is one of those.
It's Happy Halloween belated.
It's one of those that dramatically changes the taste of it and the consistency of it
based on the size you get.
Go from the regular to king size.
I would say king size is better.
It's different, at least. I wouldn't say it's not better.
I'm glad that you recognize that, though.
But with Payday, king size is definitely better. The ratio of peanuts to nougat is a little different, and it's just very, very different.
Let's talk for a minute about how much better like the Reese's trees and pumpkins and eggs are than actual peanut butter.
She's actually surprisingly not a huge Reese's fan. I thought our whole family was. That's what we do. Shelly's a peanut butter person more than a chocolate person. She loves chocolate, but she loves peanut butter more. And so anything Reese's is good. More peanut butter to chocolate ratio she prefers. So she really likes those specialty ones.
Right.
I don't know. I would assume she likes a big cup. I don't know if we've really talked about it, but so much of the big cup stuff now, they do the gimmicky things, throwing other stuff in it.
I had one with potato chips and I thought that'd be really good.
Yeah.
But I couldn't even taste potato chips.
I had it and I'm like, I don't really notice.
I think the thing with the Reese's
I don't like the one with the Reese's Pieces in it.
I don't either.
I think it kind of wrecks it.
I don't want a chunky thing in my.
I like peanut butter M&Ms better than Reese's Pieces. It's more peanut buttery, but
it's also chocolate. Reese's Pieces doesn't have any chocolate.
Right. Yeah. Even though, that's kind of the theme behind the Reese's peanut butter
Reese's
cup. Reese's
Pieces, which really grinds my gears when people say it.
Back in the day, so those of us who are old enough to remember when Reese's Pieces came out.
When E.T. came out, right?
It very much. I mean, I was in the in that in that whole vibe there. The commercials were leaning into
product placement was immaculate.
They were really good with it.
Anyway,
but that it's Reese's Pieces are nostalgic for my childhood.
Sure.
I don't actually really love them as a candy. I'll take almost any version of M&Ms over Reese's Pieces. My favorite, this is exactly what we're talking about in the sermon, by the way, that my favorite M&Ms used to always be the plain, because you only had plain or peanut when I was a kid. So I used to always hate the peanut and love the regular, and would avoid the peanut until all my Halloween candy was gone. Right now, I love the peanut. So that's become probably.
I thought you were going to say one of the specialty
ones.
One
of my favorites, the caramel. I love the caramel, and I love the coffee nut. Those are both really good.
The best M&Ms.
I like the peanut butter, not as much as Shelly. That's her favorite.
Did you ever have? I don't think they make them anymore. But did you ever have the crispy M&Ms?
I did. I thought they were good, but I thought they were oversold.
I have a fantastic
you're
memory.
Making this more hype than what it actually merits. No, if they had made it bigger, I would have.
They were a little bigger than normal M&Ms.
Yeah, not big enough to really get the effect.
I have a fantastic memory of going to see Star Wars Episode 1 in theaters and getting a big bag of crispy M&Ms, and it was the time of my life. Anyway.
Well, I used to love. I don't know if anybody eats these anymore, but we used to love the Nestle Crunch. That was such a classic.
The Crunch Bar.
Yeah.
I had one, and George got one in his Halloween candy, and I'm like, oh man, I love it.
I feel like it's the only time you see it is in Halloween candy anymore.
And they used to have the Bunch of Crunch, like the little clusters.
Yeah, those
were good.
And
Butterfinger BBs.
Those are all good movie candies.
With Bart Simpson, he was like
any
the
of the bites, any of the little
that?
bite things, or Butterfinger bites.
BBs.
That's what they were. Now it's
BBs.
bites. I think
they
BBs. Remarketed it, so they're not round anymore.
They're always BBs.
They're just little square pockets of Butterfinger, or maybe they have both now. I don't know, but the one I just saw the other day was the Butterfinger bites, and it felt
fun anymore.
Like a Bart Simpson underachiever.
Nothing's fun anymore.
Oh well, there's a lot of things that are fun.
When did we stop living?
Careful, your millennial showing there.
Anyway, I could go down a long rabbit hole with that.
There are a lot of rabbit holes, and we've already been down most of them in the behind the paywall and the Patreon content.
Yes,
that we don't have in something to rant
about. We'll pay you to.
People are rapidly tuning out, saying you should be paying this,
anyway,
the only way we're listening to this podcast is if
you're financially compensated.
Something has to make up for this lost time. That's what my wife is saying right now. She's already tuned out.
I know she doesn't like the banter.
And
someone likes the banter.
This was very meaningful and weighty, spiritually.
I don't have anyone enriching. I can talk to about things like this, and I know I can talk to you about things like this.
There you go.
So I do it in front of all three
Speaking
of our
listeners.
Things
that I'm sure you probably would appreciate talking about, Ryan Gosling. So Shelly and I got to watch The Fall Guy the other day finally, because we've never seen it. Actually started out a little slow. Kind of the exposition. It's funny because he makes a joke about getting lost in exposition during the movie, and the movie kind of gets lost in exposition at the beginning. But the in jokes are great. Ryan Gosling is actually stinking hilarious. I just think
I know that. Yeah,
he's like the anti Ryan Reynolds. They're both hilarious, but Ryan Reynolds is so sharp, and Ryan Gosling's like just.
And he's very quick. He's very
smart, but super quick.
Right.
And I really enjoy him. He's one of those guys that I think, like a lot of handsome leading men that a lot of guys will try to hate. How do you hate Ryan Gosling?
No,
this
really
guy
can't.
he's a peach.
Right.
He's a gem. From his very first roles, after Disney,
Mickey Mouse Club.
When you see him in it's actually a Disney movie is Remember the Titans.
Yes.
How do you not think?
And he didn't even have like a very, very big role in that one, but
one of the greatest movies ever made. But that's just me. And then you go from that to The Notebook. Like, this cat's hitting home runs every time he comes to the plate. And I just really think he's a very likable guy. And for those of us who remember the old The Fall Guy TV series with Lee Majors, there's a cameo that is significant. I think it's fun.
Don't spoil it.
I don't want to spoil it because it's a brand spanking new movie that hasn't been in theaters yet. Oh wait, no, that's not true.
It's less than a year old,
but it's new enough.
Yes.
That reason we just got to watch it, we missed it in the theaters.
Oh.
It was only in theaters for a short time. It felt like a lot of things these days. But when it first came to streaming, it's paid streaming. It's like $20.
Tell me about it.
$20 to watch a stupid movie.
I watched Barbie on the plane coming home from Florida this summer because I hadn't seen it yet.
I really liked it.
I liked it too. he's hilarious in that. But I watched it on the plane, and now George thinks because I watched it on the plane, it's my favorite movie. We were at the library the other day, and he was in the kids section. And he goes, "Mom, I found your favorite book." And I was like, "What is it?" And he brings back a Barbie book. I'm like,
you know what's funny is I'm going to throw BJ Clark under the bus. BJ and my dad, my macho farm dad, they bonded over watching the Barbie animated movies.
Those were classics.
They were really good, actually. Classics. There was some really good stuff there.
Good
but it's funny that BJ and my dad would be watching Barbie movies without anybody else around.
No judgment here.
It was good stuff, and
your dad was leading him in
still got some. Yeah,
I stretched.
Dad was he was getting older. He went soft. He started holding mom's purse at the mall and stuff like that. Wearing clogs and whatever, Crocs. But I was calling them clogs. But anyhow, that's if my mom listens, she'll make a comment, I hope. But so, anyways, as we're looking at
what are we talking about?
So John and I were talking about the Barbie movie, actually.
Yeah.
That it's a unique situation because you heard so much, so much banter about it in just in the social world, whether social media or radio or whatever, and everybody had an opinion. This is a anti-man, pro-feminist movie, and so on and so forth. But when you get people from looking at it from both sides, who absolutely are completely mixed about whether they love it or hate it, what the message is from it, that says something about the art, about that you did something significant here. That like the guys on the Daily Wire who are coming from the same basic framework of what they believe, and some absolutely loved it, thought it was fantastic, and some absolutely hated it and thought it was garbage, and they could argue about that and both make their points. That says something about the balance and the approach.
That's what you want from a movie. You want people to talk about it, right?
Yeah, you may have connected and hit a nerve there with something. Like I said, Emma went into it expecting to see a worldview that she would not like, and came away from it feeling very, very different than what she expected.
Good.
So that was cool.
I liked it.
But again, Ryan Gosling makes everything better, and Margot Robbie's pretty. She's pretty actually.
There's a line in the Barbie movie because there's a narrator, and Margot Robbie as Barbie says something about like, "I'm not pretty" or something. And the narrator goes, "Margot Robbie was the wrong person to cast in this to say I'm not pretty." Like breaks the fourth wall for a minute.
Yeah. I do love fourth wall breaking. And there's some of the in-jokes in The Fall Guy are just short of breaking the fourth wall. It's like really close to that. But I just think it's fun. It reminded me actually, so you have the 80s TV series, but some of the banter reminded me of things from the 50s and 60s, which is some of my favorite movies.
Cool.
But that's not what we're talking about. Instead, we are talking about is the nature, character, and role of leaders in the church. And
you finally got there.
Yeah. And we may not have been leading very well in this podcast, but
I never proclaimed to be a leader.
But as we were
we
were looking at 1 Peter chapter 5 verses 1-4. We've got like 3 minutes left in the podcast right now.
Good night, everybody.
So
Merry Christmas.
But as we looked at what Peter was saying, we only were taking the first 4 verses there.
It was a short sermon. You can get through
it. But the podcast is inevitably longer because it's way less disciplined. Don't misunderstand for those who are listening. It's not that it was a short sermon. It was a short sermon.
It was a normal sermon.
It's longer than normal. When I talk to my buddies, like, "Oh, I went so long. We were like 40 minutes this week." I'm like, "Did you even start? What did you do in 40 minutes? Golly. Are you kidding me? I can't even eat breakfast that quick." Well, I can, but I had a granola bar today. But as we're looking at 1 Peter 5 verses 1-4, Peter's point was that those who lead Christ's church with Christ's heart receive Christ's reward. And so that was kind of the whole very nature of it. Is he's gone through the letter and he's been talking about how we as Christ followers are. We're separate from the world. We're here, but we don't belong to this world. We're aliens and strangers, or elect sojourners, as we've used so often. And so we look different and we function different, and we don't travel this journey the same way unbelievers do. And after going through talking about the suffering, the persecution that we go through, the judgment that begins with the house of God, and the purification that comes on for it. He ends chapter 4 with, so then those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful creator and continue to do good. And directly from that goes into, he's in chapter 5, he's kind of got his ending instructions. So if we see this as a survival guide for travelers, as we've called it, then we're getting to the wrap up, to the summary in chapter 5. And he goes directly from this idea of suffering according to God's will is not something we should act like, why is life so hard? Why is this strange thing happening to us? And that applies, the principle applies, whether we're talking about actual persecution for the faith, or the effects of sin that we have in the world, or the spiritual persecution that may not manifest itself as actual, I hate you for your faith, I'm going to cut your head off kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Not so much that, as we live in a world where we are constantly under attack by the enemy of our souls, the world, the flesh, the devil, all conspiring to, in a sense, persecute us, because we have defected from the kingdom of this world and become citizens of God's kingdom. So that puts us at odds. And the whole letter's been focused on that we're discipling, we're maturing, we're growing in Christ. But as we do that, we function as aliens and strangers here, foreigners passing through. And I keep seeing behind Peter's words, Paul's words, that in 2 Corinthians 5:20, that we are ambassadors, that we are here representing the kingdom of God in the kingdom of this world, so that people through the church can rightly see who God is and give him glory and praise. That's our purpose that we see in 1 Peter 2:9 and 10, that we've been called out so that we can proclaim the excellencies of the one who called us out of darkness into his glorious, marvelous, wonderful light. Now, he goes from all that into his final instructions, which starts with, to the elders among you. All right. So he's talked about suffering, persecution. He says, to the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder, a witness of Christ's sufferings, and one who will also share in the glory to be revealed. That's a pretty good start, right? So he's saying we're in this together. I'm talking to you elders. He's been talking to everybody. Now I'm talking to you who are leading the church. So this is to those who lead. And I'm telling you, as one of you, the things that I'm telling you apply to me too. Right? I'm going through this. I witnessed Christ's sufferings personally. He's already been talking about the fact that we suffer with Christ when we suffer for Christ. We're participating in his sufferings. I saw him go through it. We're going through it. And just like you, we are together in the fact that we will participate. We will share in the glory that will be revealed when he returns. So we bite the bullet now, right? It's the cross before the crown. Verse 2, he says, be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, serving as overseers. So we establish here there's a job to do, right? You have to be shepherds of God's flock, but it's also not your flock. It's God's flock. And so he's entrusting us as stewards of his family, of his resources. We belong to God, and he's placed leaders. He's gifted pastors, teachers, elders, evangelists to be in this role of equipping the saints. And the job of the pastor, elder, overseer, is then to be an under shepherd under our chief shepherd, to take care of God's flock on his behalf. And we're to do this with the right heart, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be. So we don't have this grumbling attitude. We find joy in not only the journey, but in the mission of leading the flock on this journey. And then he gets specific. So in your willingness, you're not motivated by money, not greedy for money, or the newer NIV says not for dishonest gain. All right. But the King James says not for filthy lucre. The idea is that the motivation of wealth, if you're doing this task, if you're leading the church with an eye toward earthly gain, be it financial, primarily in mind here, or power, or whatever else, if that's your motivation, then it's shameful. It's embarrassing. You should get out of the job. But eager to serve. And then he compares it to the differences that Jesus pointed out between how the world handles authority. The world sees authority as power, and how Christ followers handle authority. Christ followers see authority as responsibility and service. And so he says, verse 3, not lording your eldership, your leadership over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. So in other words, as a shepherd, you're not driving the flock, you're leading the flock. You're in with the sheep out in front, setting an example. You're going where you're taking them. And that's the point we need to see there. You don't get to be in an ivory tower and enjoy the as the Amplified Bible says, not taking with it the natural profit that is due the office. That's not what drives you. You love people, so you're with people and you're living life among them and in front of them, being an example to the flock. You were going to say something.
Well, I think that it's at first I was like, why is he really? Why is this not why is it important, but why does he feel the need to specifically address this? And then I'm like, well, because it's a very natural human thing when you're in a position of power or authority or leadership to kind of often start to get a little too big for your britches.
Right.
And when people are looking up to you in one way or another, it's very easy to start thinking of yourself as better or somehow above,
right?
And so
that's the world's way of approaching
right?
This, right?
And so I think
the boss is the boss. Fear me, respect my authority.
So this is that's not right for this podcast.
Not the reference you want.
So but yeah, it's unnatural what he's saying. And so I think that, when we were talking about it on Sunday, I'm like, was this really that important for him to say? I mean, don't these guys get it? But I'm like, yeah, it is really important for him to say because we don't do that.
Right. And even when we do get it, we will gravitate toward that.
Sure. Yeah.
And, as we started up, we were talking about Dr. MacArthur discussing the public failing of a friend and partner in ministry. And it's heartbreaking. That it probably hit me harder than most. People, there are a lot of bandwagon jumpers that will just kick failed Christian leaders when they're down. And that's not a Christ-like attitude. That's something that comes from the world. And so when people in the church do that, we're not acting like the church, we're acting like the world. That doesn't mean we excuse it or we protect it or any of those kinds of things. But, just the whole attitude of let's jump on, let's pile on these people. That was my issue. And I haven't watched it yet. I probably will at some point, or watch or listen to, I should say, the what is the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill or whatever, it's the podcast that was about that. At some point, I probably should watch that because there are probably warnings that we should be aware of. But the whole vibe of it, and it's also why I canceled my, not that particular thing, but the attitude is why I canceled my subscription to Christianity Today some time ago. It is Christianity Today. I think they left right thinking some time ago, and which is heartbreaking for me. This is Billy Graham's magazine, right? This is I put a big chunk of my life and finances into Christianity Today over the years, and when they started moving, I'm just going to say that when they started moving leftward, the political positioning became, I think, more important in the editorial stuff and in the choices that they made than the gospel. And so when you couch those things in gospel language, I think you're forgetting what you're about. And so that particular podcast, I think there's a place for examining what went wrong when Christian leaders fail. I think that's right for us to do that. But there's an attitude that does that in-house and even on the outside, because I think the world needs to see how we handle these things. There's an attitude of that is restorationist, that can say, okay, like the Reformation. We spent a lot of time this week. Here's my Martin Luther shirt. We spent a lot of time this week and this month talking about Reformation things, and that mattered. And there were evils that needed to get addressed. But when the goal is to reform, to correct, to get back to where we belong, that's different than the attitude of I'm just going to keep punching. I'm just going to keep on dragging this around in the mud. And so I didn't listen to that. But the thing with that Mars Hill podcast was watching the dynamics of the pastor that was in charge, that led that, who is back in the public eye. And I have some issues with that. I have some issues with a lot of things that we do in regards to what we call restoration, that I think often isn't. But those things, even when James MacDonald when he had his public scandal that was going on, those things didn't shock me because you could see the dynamics in leadership. And MacDonald in particular was I don't know that Driscoll addressed it the same way, but MacDonald was pretty open about it. I struggle with pride and these. I have a forceful personality, so I can be a bully. So my issue is, where are the overseers? Where are the elders in this who are supposed to be holding the pastor accountable? That's one of the things that I treasure at our church is, we're certainly not perfect, but there's nobody in our overseer council who would not, with loving honesty, confront me and hold me accountable for my teaching, for my conduct, for my attitude. There are no yes men, and we don't have belligerents. I think you can't afford either one,
right?
And so it's our nature as people who still struggle with sin. It's our nature to twist and distort what God gives us as a gift, as a right thing. And so if the world, the flesh, and the devil are conspiring against us and shaping the way we think, it's very easy for us as those who have been given authority in the church to then begin to drift to what do I want to say, to kind of gravitate toward a fleshly way of thinking, the world's way of thinking. So we begin to think through pride instead of humility. We'll talk more about humility this next week. But for Christian leaders, if you're seeing your authority, and I use the word intentionally, if you're seeing that authority, the position, as anything else than the responsibility to serve, then you're not looking at it through the lens of Christ. That's the job. And that applies far beyond church leadership. It applies to, let's, as a man, let me talk about husbands and fathers. You've been assigned the role of being the head of the house. You are to portray Christ to your wife, to your children, to the watching world. When you think that is about you, you fail. When you begin to be that husband who's going to lord it over, I am the head of the house, do what I say, make me a sandwich, all these kinds of things, and all the kids have to be quiet and all that kind of thing, then you've missed the purpose of your assignment. You've been delegated authority, not because God wants you to have power. He gives you enough power to do the job that he's called you to do. That's the nature of authority. But that the call is to responsibility. Right. You have the responsibility of serving your wife and children in such a way that Christ is magnified, that they are sanctified and discipled. And if you do anything else, then you're starting to get into your way instead of God's way. Right. Well, that same thing applies in the church. There's such a parallel between the family model, the paternal maternal model in the family, and what we see in church leadership biblically as well. But the picture that we should have here is exactly what he says. You need to be doing this. You need to be leading with an attitude of serving, of loving, of being among the sheep if you're going to be leading the flock. And you have to get dirty. You got to be in it. To be willing, as he's been talking about, to suffer with the flock, to suffer with Christ. And if you do that, then he gets to verse 4 and says, when the chief shepherd appears, you'll receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So there is a reward that is right to look for. So he's not saying that you shouldn't be looking for a reward. He's saying, look for your reward in heaven. This is the call to all of us as Christians, that we should be looking for our reward eternally from God, that the greatest reward we can have is him. And the next greatest reward we can have is to stand before him and have him say, well done, good and faithful servant. And even this crown of glory that we have here, we have the picture in Revelation that we'll be casting, just as the 24 elders in Revelation 4, casting their crowns before him, that we will be doing that same kind of thing. Whatever glory we have, it all goes back to him. So it's all only for the glory of God. Soli Deo Gloria, to go back to Reformation mottos. And as leaders in the church, Christian leaders of any situation, if you're the president of the United States, which I will say clearly, we have had very, very few actual Christian presidents of the United States. So for those of you who say, I would never vote for somebody I know isn't a Christian, or I don't, honestly believe is a Christian, you probably have had to redefine what a Christian is to do that, because the vast majority of our leaders are not. And we shouldn't expect them to be, because the nation isn't the church. But if I claim to belong to Christ, to represent Christ in this world, and I'm given any position of authority, president, governor, legislator, boss at work, supervisor, husband, father, mother, parent, all of these, father, mother, parent kind of goes together, all of these different areas where we could, team captain on your sports team in high school, any of these things, then I need to look at that not as a position of privilege. I need to look at that as a position of responsibility and reflect Christ in how I do that.
Okay. We will stop there for today. So you got a lot in. Perfect timing.
How about that?
Thank you guys for listening. And we have a few more weeks here in 1 Peter before we get into the Advent season. So
Indeed.
Never too late to join us on Sunday mornings, or watch the live stream on Sunday mornings if you're not in the area.
If you come at noon, it's too late to join us.
It's true. Especially this last week when everything was so short. I'm just kidding. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time. Thank you, YouTube.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy All Saints Day.